So I entered college on the Northwestern football team around June 13th, 2020. And within my first week, I was so excited. Like, we moved into a hotel, all the freshman football players, and I was making friends left and right. And I was starting to find my guys, and I felt like at home already at first. And it was super exciting. And I remember within one of the first few days, we were doing summer lifts, and I got paired up with a guy named Rashawn Slater, who is now the starting left tackle on the Los Angeles Chargers. And we were doing like dumbbell rear elevated lunges, split squats, some crazy thing. And I was like this freshman, like I'm not very big guy. I'm like 180 pounds, and I think I was doing like 45 or like 50s maybe. And this guy's doing like 175-pound dumbbells. And I'm like, where the fuck am I? I'm around some incredible athletes. So that was a funny way to start it. And within the first few weeks, like things were going really well. I remember I was running one-on-ones and routes against my friends just for fun before we actually had like started practice and things. And I was feeling good. I was feeling confident. I was feeling fast. I was feeling sharp. But I was starting to develop a toxic relationship with food and my body. So here's what started to happen. After that summer of just drinking and partying, like senior grad party season, I had put on a little bit of weight. I went into senior year of high school football probably at 172 pounds, 175 pounds, and I was entering college at like 187, 185, 187. So I'd put on a little bit of chubby weight, and I was starting to notice it for the first time, especially in comparison to the other wide receivers in my wide receiver room. So the other wide receivers in a D1 team, if you know anything about football, they're usually just like jacked and shredded and like six packs without trying, and they eat like crazy bad food and it doesn't matter. But yet I was noticing, I don't look like these guys. I don't look as good. I got a little like, I've got a gut now. And I started to want to change. I remember they would like give us so much food, like infinite food, and I started to realize like, oh wait, I've never thought about nutrition. I've always just eaten as much as I wanted to, and it never mattered because I was so active. But the past 7 months after getting my first shoulder surgery, and I'm sitting around and I'm drinking beers and playing Xbox, yeah, I start to put on weight. Like, and it was crazy that happened. And so with this weight gain came a higher chance of getting injured. And so what happened was I was doing a one-on-one against one of my good friends, Nigel, and I believe what happened is I ran this route, I ran a comeback, and I jumped up for the ball, and I caught the ball, and I landed on his foot, and I rolled my ankle really fucking bad, my left ankle really bad, and it had me out for a few weeks at the start. And so already I was like off to not such a good start with the coaches. I was like this new freshman walk-on receiver, and I just got hurt, so now I wasn't practicing, but they weren't really sure how injured I was, and I was starting to lose a little bit of confidence, and I was starting to become more and more self-conscious about my weight and body. And so I remember at this time when I was hurt, I would go in to the weight room before practice and before everything, and I would ride the bike for an hour before, even before we go practice, and I would like neurotically be looking at the scale, and I was starting to get so self-conscious about my body and body image. And I remember this was the time I think I was starting to awaken spiritually a little bit, like gaining awareness around the desire to change. I never had a desire to change before that summer of college football. I always was just so cool with who I was, but there came this desire to change. And I remember I would say, like, today's the date. July 23rd, 2020 is the date I changed my life forever. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but I would always think, like, maybe I'll get a tattoo for this date because this is the day I'm going to change. This is the day I'm going to stop eating shit food. This is the day I'm going to stop masturbating. This is the day I'm going to stop scrolling TikTok and Instagram Reels. But it never was the day. I would restrict for a few days and then right back. I'd restrict and then go right back. And that pattern would repeat itself for the next few years, up until now, where I feel pretty free and happy, and I'm beyond that stuff, which is such a blessing. But the food and body image issues really peaked, and the self-consciousness peaked when at practice one day freshman year I got called chubby by a senior player on the team that I looked up to and really liked and respected a lot. And he like yelled at me, he's like, "Moses, you chubby motherfucker, why aren't you practicing?" or something like that. And like I kind of laughed it off, but that hurt. That had never happened to me in my life. I'd never been called chubby in my life. So that hurt. And then now I was self-conscious about it, and now I was developing self-hatred around my body, that it was this downward spiral of like, oh, I hate my body and I feel shameful about it, so let me go binge eat more so that I feel more shame, so then I can just bask in that shame even though I get a little bit of pleasure, and then I keep just like downward spiraling. So I would say this freshman year during COVID football season was when some of my early mental health issues began to turn online. I started to become self-conscious and self-aware, and that first year of school, it was just like kind of a depressing time because COVID was going on and like no students were there. We had to wear masks all the time. We even had to wear masks at football practice. It was crazy. And school was online, so like I'm basically just stuck in my room, my dorm room. This phone doesn't phone. But I'm just stuck in my dorm room basically doing online class and like not really paying attention or caring or cheating. And then in football, I like kind of enjoying it, but not really, because I feel everybody on the team is so much better than me, and I should not be here secretly, and I don't feel like I fit in. So that was beginning to feel rough, but I started to find respite in two things: smoking weed and playing NBA 2K. That became the one part of my day I could look forward to, because school, super hard, not super fulfilling. I'm studying economics, I'm taking like calculus, it's super hard, and like I don't like it. I'm smart enough to get by in it, but I'm not enjoying it. I actually was taking a Buddhist psychology class at the time, which is funny. Now I'm wearing this and like I'm meditating and I'm all spiritual and all these things, but at the time I had no interest. And like when it would be time to meditate during class, I would just turn my camera off and like go on Instagram Reels. Like I was so fucking asleep and tuned out to the beauty of life, but it's okay. I didn't know. So I remember I never really smoked weed much in high school. I would smoke like once in a while with my friends on 420 or something, and maybe at a party, but it was never really my thing. I was so focused on football that I didn't want to do it. But now, I remember freshman year of college, my cousin came to visit me, and he brought his dab pen, and for the first time I hit the dab pen and I played NBA 2K with my friends, and I was just like, oh my god, this is fucking peak experience. This is so much fun. And it was way more fun than anything else that was going on in my life. And so it became the only thing I started to turn to. And like all addictions, I believe all addictions start off as innocent experiments, right? It's like, hey, I'll hit the dab pen. Oh, we'll play 2K. Oh, it's fun. Like, we'll do this every night. And it was so fucking fun. Like, me and my friends we'd build these franchises in my league, and we'd play for hours, and like we'd trade off and we'd play each other in the championship, and I loved it. And that was something I did as a kid, like playing NBA My League and building teams and actualizing players' potentials. And it was the seed of my new career now, helping people unlock their potentials. But at the time, it was just smoking weed and playing NBA 2K, which was so fucking fun. But it turned into a vice and escapism where nothing else began to matter. All I wanted to do, I would just want to disassociate the whole day, just get by, just go to practice and get by, and can't wait till it's over because I'm getting my ass kicked and I'm fucking nervous against all these great players. And in school, I'm just kind of like disassociating and not really paying attention or caring, so that I could get home and like once it's 4 p.m., boom, or DoorDash, weed, 2K. That does sound so fun still, and it is still fun. It is still okay to do. It's not bad, but it was an everyday thing and the only thing I looked forward to. And yeah, I wouldn't change it. It was, in some ways, it was a great time, but in other ways, it was not a good time. So, towards the end of this season, we're a pretty good team. We are like poised poised to make the Big Ten championship. And I didn't get in the game once during freshman year, but that's to be expected as like a freshman preferred walk-on wide receiver. But it was around bowl time, Big Ten championship time. So we're going to play Ohio State in the Big Ten championship, and they have Justin Fields, they have Garrett Wilson, I think they had Chase Young, and we almost beat them. We were like, I think we were down 10-6 at halftime or something like that. And like this dude Brandon Joseph, who's now a safety on the Detroit Lions, had this crazy one-handed interception for us, and it was such a great game. But before that game, about a week before that game, I now tore my right shoulder. So it was practice. I was kind of burnt out. I was like, I don't really want to be here. Like that was kind of the feeling almost every day. And I'm running a one-on-one against this corner named Rod Hurd, who's now starting corner at Notre Dame. Crazy how all these guys have just gone on and flourished. It's amazing. And I'm running this one-on-one, and I'm trying to get off the line, and I like try to swim to get his hands off me like this, and my shoulder just comes out of the socket. It just completely comes out, and I fall to the ground and collapse, and I'm out, I'm done. And I end up needing to get surgery, so I'm not suited up for the Big Ten championship, and I'm not suited up for the bowl game in Orlando, Florida. But honestly, I'm fine with it. I'm secretly a little bit happy about it, because now I don't have to go practice. Now I can just hit my dab pen and play NBA 2K all day with no guilt, and now it's winter break and we're in a new hotel and I bring my Xbox and it's just DoorDash and NBA 2K and nothing else matters except that. And wow, what an interesting time. Like given who I am now and who I was in high school, that was such a low point, an interesting time. So I end up getting surgery around that January. And throughout spring, it's kind of more of the same, like just going to class, not practicing because I'm out and hurt, but I'm like starting to rehab, starting to get in better shape, starting to lift, actually starting to get some momentum back in my life. And this is when something completely out of left field comes into my awareness that starts to alter the trajectory of my life. And it was a startup social media company called VibeQuest that I began to build with a few of my really good friends. Avi Sanghavi, he was the founder of it. Carl Richardson, Alexa Russo, volleyball player. Carl was a quarterback. And one other guy, Connor, who was our coder guy. Also, our friend Jaden helped with this a little bit too, with the marketing, which was cool. But I remember at this point, I was probably sitting in my room playing 2K, and Carl, my best friend on the football team at the time, quarterback from California, he comes and knocks on my door with this random kid who I don't know who it is, this random Indian dude. And he tells me his name's Avi, and they're like, we have an idea, and we want you to be in on it. And I'm like, okay, like I'm open, but I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm open-minded. Let's talk about it. And so the idea was creating a SnapMaps-like interactive social media platform for college campuses and college kids. And so the vision was like, if you know about Snapchat and SnapMaps, basically everybody's Bitmoji or character would populate on the map, and then you'd be able to see what events were going on around campus. So you'd be able to see what bars are people at, what parties are going on, are people playing pickup basketball, is there like a meditation club? Is there a reading a book club? Is there a study group? Whatever. Our vision was to create this holistic, all-in-one hub and platform for college kids on college campuses. And so throughout that spring and summer, I kind of went from being really unfocused and like just wanting to play 2K and numb out and disassociate to now I'm pretty fucking focused and there's like a vision for my life. And that's the biggest thing. Like now every time I slip back into old habits or old behaviors or old patterns, it's because I've lost vision. And so I regained this vision of I want to try to play on the football team this upcoming season. I'm coming off a shoulder injury. I've had time to rest. I'm like getting my body in shape. And I want to help make this social media company a $1 billion company. I remember I had the thought, like, I want to be both Mark Zuckerberg and Julian Edelman. And Julian Edelman's an NFL wide receiver who I really looked up to. But I wanted to do them both at the same time, which we'll see was not a great idea. So coming into that summer, I was super motivated. Julian Edelman was my inspiration. He wrote a book, actually, which is great, and I read it, and I loved how disciplined he was. I buzzed my head to be like him. I would be the first person in the locker room at like 4:30 in the morning doing cold plunge and like super fucking focused. And that's been a pattern my whole life. It's been a pattern of extremes. It's been a pattern of complete numbing out dissociation, NBA 2K, smoking weed, or I'm super focused, I'm like the most dedicated person on the team. And then I would oscillate between these two pendulums. And now my philosophy is the Tao, the middle way, which is funny. I had to go to those extremes to learn that they're not right. The middle way is the way. And so that summer, I was living at home to save my parents money, and I would drive like 40 minutes every morning to practice. I would leave at like 4 in the morning, maybe even earlier sometimes, and I'd get there like 4:30 or 5 and be the first one there. And I love that time because I would drink my coffee on the way there. I'd listen to a Julian Edelman podcast or like some other type of sports podcast, and I was grinding and I was starting to do better. And VibeQuest was also starting to come into fruition at this time. So the whole summer we were planning marketing, and me and Carl, quarterback, we would actually go in door to door to every single restaurant or bar in Evanston, Illinois, where Northwestern was, and we would pitch them on the idea, and we would get sponsorships and collaborations. And there was this one bar at Northwestern called the Deuce, and the Deuce was like the freshman sophomore bar that everybody would go to when they're underage because they didn't care. And maybe I shouldn't say that, but whatever. We actually got like our own drink there. It was called like the VQ special or the VibeQuest special, and it was like $5. And I remember going there later in the year for a party, and like they had our drink on the menu, which was so funny. So we basically went in and pitched VibeQuest to like every single bar, restaurant in Evanston, and we got a lot of cool collaborations and partnerships, and it was starting to take off. And so as we get into the school year and the football season, my life is starting to actually go in a really positive direction. Things are starting to turn out well. And so around September 20th, this is when everything was coming together at the same time. I won Special Teams Player of the Week in practice that week, and that was the first time I ever got recognized by the coaches, and I was working my ass off, and I made the travel team, which if it was an away game, I would have gone and traveled, which would have been awesome, but it was a home game, so that basically just meant like I get to be in a hotel with the team, I get to be in the meetings and all of that. And so if you don't know college football, not everybody travels to the games. They take 85 or 70 to 75 guys to travel, so that means you're like in the hotel, you're in the meetings. The other guys just stay back home if it's an away game, or they stay at their dorm or wherever it is and then just go to the game and are on the sidelines, but they didn't travel with the team. So this was the first time I got to travel with the team. I was super hyped, and this same game that we were going into, it was September 26th, 2021 against Ohio, and we won like 35-7 or 35-0. And the same day that this game was happening, we were having our VibeQuest launch party. So we were going live on the App Store, and I had been in charge of setting up the launch party at this frat house that day. And so I remember like the night before the game, like going and setting everything up for the party, making a huge banner, talking with food vendors and like getting a food truck to come to the party, putting wristbands that said VibeQuest, a new era of socialization is what we said, and putting those wristbands on people's dorm rooms across the campus, and making t-shirts that said VibeQuest on them, a new area of socialization. And that party was going on during our game. And so I'm here at the game, making the travel team for the first time, actually getting in the game for the first time, even though it was garbage time and like it didn't matter. I still got in at the last minute and like got to block for a few plays, and my friend Jake Arthurs, another walk-on, scored a touchdown, and I was celebrating in the end zone with him, and I have a picture of it, and it was awesome. And while this is all going on, VibeQuest is having their launch party, and so there was an older tight end on the team named Trey Pugh, and like the whole time during the game, This is during a Big Ten college football game. And this guy's just yelling on the sidelines the whole time. He's like, Vibe Quest, Vibe Quest. We're trying to get the whole stands to start chanting Vibe Quest. And after the game, we go to the party and we find out I think 1,000 people came to this party. And 1,000 people followed our social media on Instagram. And 1,000 people signed up for our app. And it was like, holy shit, this is really going to be a success. Now, the app was not technically sound and was not at the place where it actually worked, but the concept was there and the people were behind it, because at first it was like, this is an app that's going to throw parties and tell us where parties are and give us free alcohol. That was basically it. And people were into it. And so everything was looking good, right? It was like a peak experience. We played, we won football. I got to go in the game. Launch party happened. 1,000 people downloaded the app. Party happened later that night at that bar. People are ordering the Vibe Quest drink. It was like, holy shit, this is crazy. And within that next week, we start to think really big. We start to talk. Avi starts to talk, the founder. He starts to talk with kids from Stanford and kids from Notre Dame about expanding the app to their campuses. And at this point, I'm super convinced this is the next Facebook. We would actually watch the movie The Social Network in our dorm room, which is about Facebook's origin and launch at Harvard, and we're the next fucking Facebook. We're gonna be millionaires, billionaires. And for a few days, it really felt like that. Then something happened where that same day we were launching our first party in the app, there was another frat party on campus that got involved with some sexual assault or raping incidents. And Vibe Quest was now somehow getting tied into this because we were associated with the fraternity life, because we hosted our party with a fraternity. I think it was Pike. But there was another incident on campus. And so now there was, the next day, Sunday morning, there was protests on campus. 1,000 kids were protesting and marching on campus, saying to abolish Greek life and abolish fraternity and all this stuff. And so we had a meeting as our little 5-person Vibe Quest team about what should we do about it. And in that meeting, this is when everything kind of went south. I remember saying, I think we should stay out of it and not say anything. It's not our business. And it's nobody's fault particularly, but there was a consensus among us as a team that we should put out a public statement on our Instagram, which now had 1,000+ followers. Mind you, most of those followers being fraternity kids, because we hosted our party with the fraternity. And so there's only 8,000 people on Northwestern's campus. And 1,000 of them were frat kids that followed us, and 1,000 of them were the protesters that didn't even know who we were. And we decided to side with the protesters. We said, fuck Greek life on social media, and we were renouncing Greek life, which was the only people who knew about us or were interested in our thing. And from that moment, it was pretty much over. The frat kids kind of rebelled against Avi, which was really tough. A lot of shitty stuff happened to him, and he went through a journey himself. And we ended up abolishing Vibe Quest a week or two later. Everything just kind of collapsed in on itself. It imploded basically because we kind of caved under the perceived pressure. Looking back, I always saw it as pretty playful. I never felt that much pressure with it because it wasn't my thing. I was kind of just some football player who was helping out, and I kind of liked it, and I loved thinking big and being an entrepreneur and marketing and being a visionary. And I didn't know anything about this stuff at the time. I was kind of just playing around. But so it never really got to me, but the pressure got to us collectively as a team. And so we all ended up going on our individual journeys after that, and it ended up collapsing. And within that same time period, going back to football now, the next week after I won Special Teams Player of the Week and I got in the game and all this great stuff with Vibe Quest happened, we had a bye week. And so that means we don't have a game. And so we're like lifting a lot, like probably too much, especially the younger kids, the freshmen and sophomores. We're lifting a ton, and they're giving the older kids, the starters, like basically time to rest and recover. So we're lifting a lot, a lower body, and we're like running a lot at practice, and we're getting so many reps, and like I'm not used to this, but I start to make some good plays. I remember in team, like in a live game, I made a good move, had a good slant, like 15-yard catch. I'm like, let's fucking go. Like, this is fun. I'm starting to get this. But Monday, Tuesday were good. Wednesday, I'm starting to feel fatigued and tired. And Thursday, I'm just like burnt out. I'm like, this is so fucking much. And the thoughts start to form in my head before that practice. Subtle thoughts of, fuck, like, what if I just got hurt? What if I just didn't have to be here? What if I could just go chill? And those thoughts created my reality. And we'll probably get into this way later in this series, but in terms of like the power of the mind and manifestations and beliefs crystallize into reality to form external circumstances. And I didn't know this at the time, but the belief of maybe I would like to just get hurt manifested that same practice. So later in the practice, I'm kind of like going through the motions. I'm not really wanting to be there, and I'm running a one-on-one, again, same side as the last year with my shoulder against, I think, the same guy at corner. Might have been a different guy the first time, but this guy was Rod Hurd, the Notre Dame safety. And so I'm supposed to run a 10-yard hitch, and I fucking hate this route. I hate this route. I hate being on the outside because I'm 5'10", and I should be in the slot, but we have too many slots, so I play outside, and I have to go against these taller, longer corners, and I'm not that fast or athletic, and I can't get off the line, and so I run this route, I release to the left, I try to stop at like 7 yards and turn around, and when I stop, I'm too stiff, my leg is locked out, my left leg, and boom, it snaps, and I tear my ACL. I tear my fucking ACL, like 4 days after I got in my first game. And at first I didn't know it was a torn ACL. I thought I kind of just sprained it, and there was this interesting thing going on in my mind of like, fuck, I can't believe this happened, fuck, like, is my career over, fuck, and like, oh, thank God, like, okay, cool, like, it was such an interesting little dance going on in my mind, and so they took me off, they started to test it a little bit, they're like, yeah, we don't know what this is, and they're like, you want to try to run, or you want to try to go back in? I was like, yeah, I want to try to go back in. I think that same incident that happened in high school of I didn't go back in the game when I was hurt, when I could have, came back full circle where I'm like, I'm going to try to go back. And so I remember I was running up and down the sidelines. Like, I was still able to run, even though my ACL was torn, I didn't know. And I was like, I just don't know. And then the trainer's like, we want to take you downstairs and check on some things. So they start doing tests, and they're like, yeah, it could be an ACL. And I start crying. I start fucking crying. There was a part of me that knew that it was the end of my football career, even though I didn't know it at the time. It was like my higher self knew. So they take me to get an x-ray, or x-ray first. X-ray's fine. But then they're like, you got to get an MRI in the next few days. So I get an MRI, and it comes back as a torn ACL. And so again, part of me is devastated, but part of me is relieved. It's like, cool, I don't have to practice anymore for the rest of the year. Cool, I can chill out, play NBA 2K. And I'm kind of back in the same cycle. And it starts to shift how I'm thinking about my future. So at that point, I pretty much check out of football. I'm like, I don't fucking care anymore. I don't want to be here. And I literally, like, I stopped going to meetings. I stopped going to practice. I stopped showing up to pretty much everything. And if I did show up, I was showing up high. I was showing up smoking weed and just just kind of dissociating. And I remember like watching one of the games from my dorm room, and my friend got in the game, and I'm just smoking weed with all like these random kids in my room, and I'm like, what the fuck is my life right now? I'm supposed to be on the team. I'm smoking weed with these random kids, and I'm watching the game. Strange times. So I end up getting that surgery around November, and I end up staying at home for a little bit. Like, with an ACL, you can't do anything, you can barely move, and that was a tough period. I would say like November and December was really tough because I still had to go to classes, and I still had to go to classes like across campus with the torn ACL on crutches in the snow. And this was like peak victim mindset. It was like, why? Like, woe is me. Like, my life fucking sucks. I didn't have a concept of God at the time, but I was subtly, subconsciously blaming it all on God of like, life's just not fair. And so around this time, I'm starting to think more about my career. Like, what do I want to do with my life? And thinking about transferring. So these are two new things that start to come into my awareness. So that, I think it was October, November, I wanted to go get an internship for the winter at Goldman Sachs, at the most prestigious investment bank. And I also wanted to get into the investment banking club at the school, which like guaranteed you get a really high paying, like 150K, 200K job coming out of college. And so I remember for both of these opportunities, I made it to the final day at Goldman Sachs interview, the super day. I was like one of 4, and they were going to take 2. And I made it to the final round of cuts for the investment banking fraternity club at Northwestern, which was like super prestigious. Like hundreds of kids applied and only 20 got in. And it was the same question in both interviews that I butchered, I fucked up, and I didn't get in. And the question was, what's the difference between consulting and investment banking? Here I am applying for this investment banking internship and trying to get into investment banking club, and I didn't know the answer. I had no idea, and I don't even remember what I said. I came up with some bullshit, but it seemed like those were the that was the one question in both interviews that basically didn't get me the positions. And so I started to feel just like so shitty about myself. I was like, I fucking suck. I can't get this job. I can't do it in football. 5 quests failed. I can't get into investment banking. And I'm just feeling like such a victim. I'm crying. I think I'm crying in my room. I'm angry. I'm like throwing a tantrum. I'm like, life sucks. And so I end up taking another internship at a place called Monroe Capital in Chicago for that upcoming winter. And this is, again, when things start to shift a lot in my life. So around January 2022, I begin a finance internship in downtown Chicago while being on the football team still and tearing my ACL and repairing my torn ACL, rehabbing it, and trying to transfer. And now a girlfriend comes in the picture, which is a whole nother story. So I subtly want to transfer, but I'm not really telling anybody, and I'm going at 4:30 every morning. I'm like crutching my way to the locker room, and I'm lifting at 4:30 by myself, which I actually loved. That was a fucking fun time. I'd like drink my Celsius and go lift, and this was around the time I was actually starting to awaken a little bit spiritually. I would go and I would meditate in the locker room for like 20 minutes, and I would listen to something called like the 6 codes or like the 6 keys, the 6 key meditation, I think it was called, by a guy named Vishen Lakhiani. And so Vishen Lakhiani is the CEO founder of a company called Mind Valley, which is all around like spirituality and raising consciousness and education with retreats, coaching, programs, online courses. And now it's pretty funny. That's exactly what I'm doing, or on the path to doing. But so anyways, I think it was around December, January. I'm sitting in my dorm room smoking weed, torn ACL, and I'm pretty depressed. And there's a book on my roommate's desk called The Code of the Extraordinary Mind by Vishen Lakhiani. And I feel my heart like wanting to expand right now. That one, my friend Carl put that book on my roommate's desk because he thought my roommate would like it. Truth was, it was me that was supposed to read it. And I thank God for allowing me to be open enough and aware enough to say, let's just pick this book up. And so I think I started reading that book in my dorm room bed with my torn ACL on the machine that like manually like extends your leg and straightens your leg, and for hours every day. That sucked. And I was reading the book High, and I was like, what the fuck? This guy's talking about you can create your reality? What does that mean? How do I do that? And so he's talking about like spirituality, which I had no concept of at the time. And he's talking about two really key concepts, three maybe key concepts, maybe more, that stuck with me. And so the one was called Brules, Brules, Brules. And so he said, rules are bullshit rules laid out by society that aren't true. They're just like bullshit. And so he used an example of like, with his marriage, instead of divorcing and having it be this toxic thing, him and his wife did something called a conscious uncoupling. So they were still in love in terms of like a spiritual way, still in love, but they were choosing to separate, but without hating the other person. So he's like, that's an example of a brule. Another brule is you have to like go work this job for 40 years and get a 401k and retire. And so I was like, whoa, I never heard anybody think like this before. Like nobody in my life had ever talked about these ideas, but now this book was waking me up to it. And because I was starting to smoke weed more, which was at first just fun, then escapism, then something that began to expand my consciousness and send me down a slippery slope to plant medicine and therapy and things which come later. But my mind starts to expand a little bit. The second thing that he talked about that was really important was a graph, a chart, a 4-quadrant chart called How to Bend Your Reality, basically. And so the bottom left corner, it'd be this way for you. The bottom left corner was like the worst danger zone. It was like life sucks, right? And on the x-axis, it was vision for the future, and the y-axis, it was happiness in the now. And so in this bottom left corner, there was no happiness in the now, your situation sucks, and there's no vision for the future. And that was me at some points when like VibeQuest collapsed and I didn't know who I wanted to be. I always maintained a little bit of vision for the future, which I'm grateful my mind works that way. My consciousness is like a visionary. I see the future. So I was always able to see ahead, but my happiness in the now was very low, very low. And so the chart, the quadrant above that lower left corner was vision for the future, but no happiness in the present. And that was kind of where I was, right? It was like the area of stagnation, right? I could call it the area of mental masturbation, where there is a vision, but there's no happiness now. So you're kind of just like putting off your happiness to the future, which so many of us do in our daily lives. We say happiness is out there, happiness is someday, it's once I get the job, it's once I get the girl, it's once I move here. It's all an illusion. We can only exist now. And so I was starting to wake up to that at the time. And then the bottom right corner was happiness in the now, but no vision for the future. And so this is kind of like delusion land, right? Where you're kind of just not, you're just not thinking about the future intentionally. And you can see a lot of spiritual people who operate in this zone. I mean, somebody like the Buddha who's on this book, like he's kind of transcended the need to think about the future. But at that point, like you're kind of just like, maybe you're not truly peaceful and enlightened like the Buddha, but you're kind of numbing yourself enough to not think about the future with like pleasure and entertainment. But the top right quadrant was a zone called bending reality. And that was when you're happy in the now and you have a vision for the future. And so life starts to crystallize and you start to be able to create the future you want with your mind because your frequency and vibration are high now. And so I was like, I need to get into that fucking top right corner of the chart, but how do I do it? Which comes later. The third thing I want to mention from that book is a self-analysis survey, like it was called like the 10 pillars for life or the 10 codes for life or something. And so there was 10 areas of your life that you got to evaluate on a scale of 1 to 10 for yourself. And so it was like health, relationships, finances, happiness. Maybe I'd like to do this again now. I would like to do this again now. I'm going to write that down. And there was a section around spirituality. And at this time, as a sophomore in high school, around fall, late 2021, I put spirituality as a 2 out of 10. Everything else was kind of like 4 to 7, but spirituality was a 2 because at this point I was like, I believe in evolution, I believe in biology, I believe in science, I believe in being a rational thinker and all these things. And spirituality was it too, because I had no concept of God. I had no concept of what that even meant. But I was starting to meditate. So I was like, maybe there's something here. My higher self, of course, knew. Then I took that survey again, maybe 6 to 12 months ago, like 2 years after taking it originally. And my life happiness was so much higher. And the number one thing that shifted was spirituality went from a 2 to a 9. Went from a 2 to a 9. So that is the thing that shapes everything else. And now, right here in Hawaii, my spirituality is at a 9.9. Maybe a 10. Maybe I'll give myself a 10. I'm going to give myself a 10. And that forms everything else in life. So I start to think about how am I supposed to bend reality, and the biggest thing inhibiting me was I'm not happy now. I fucking hate this place. I hate the school. I hate the mental state I'm in. I hate the football team. Hate is a strong word, but I was really strongly disliking it, and I wanted something new. And so I start to think about transferring, and I want to go play Division III quarterback, which is funny, as we'll come really full circle to that now in the present. But I wanted to go play D3 quarterback, and so I started emailing a bunch of schools. And I wanted to go to a school called Bowdoin, Bowdoin, in Maine, to play quarterback. And they wanted me, and I was going to fucking go do it. But my dad said no, which really triggered me, because it was like $90,000 a year, whereas Northwestern was $80,000, and he was paying for that. And he's like, we're not going to pay more money for you to go to some fucking school in Maine that nobody's heard of. Valid, but it pissed me off because I felt like I didn't have autonomy. The other option was going to the University of Chicago and playing quarterback there. And I was in touch with the coaches. I had a breakfast lunch meeting with a kid on the team his name's Jack, and he comes full circle in Argentina 2 years later, seeing him on the street. Life was fucking crazy. And I thought I wanted to go play there, but the thing is, the coaches couldn't help me get into the school as a transfer because of how prestigious and academic that school was. I think it was like a 1% acceptance rate. And I remember I got like advising on my transcript, and I applied and I did the whole thing, and I was on the wait list, which means they accepted me to the school without football as a student, but they didn't have space. And so I was in this waiting period. And so during this waiting period, I'm also working an internship at this finance place in Chicago, private credit. I don't even know what that means still. And basically just like not wanting to be there, but I'm like, I feel like I have to be here. So I'm working that internship. I'm kind of just getting by. I'm like, most days I'm reading at my desk instead of working. I'm reading like Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights, which was a seed of my awakening in terms of like, what can I go do with my life? I was reading Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. I was reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So I was starting to wake up a little bit, but I didn't know it yet. And I read a book called Cain and Abel from my coworker named Jake Brody, fucking legend, who had a really big impact on my life. And so towards the end of this internship, I had a meeting with Jake Brody, and it was like a review of the internship. This was probably March, before spring break that year, around March. And he was like, bro, be honest with me. And I felt I could be honest with him. He felt like an older brother. He was 23 at the time, which is crazy because I'm 23 now, and I was 20 at the time. And he was like, did you like this? And I was like, dude, to be honest, not really. And he was the first person I ever admitted that to. First person I admitted it to. And he said, bro, that's okay. You don't have to do this. And I was like, I don't? I don't have to go to the finance world? I don't have to be in a corporate job? Really? Are you sure? He's like, no, bro, you can go live your life the way you want to. He's like, I had to go leave what my dad wanted for me, like going to playing lacrosse in Indiana, to go pursue this path of pursuing finance. He's like, but you don't have to do that. You can go live a life you want. And so much gratitude for you, Jake. So much gratitude for you just saying that to me and allowing me to open my awareness. And that was a very pivotal moment. And that shaped something that is to come in terms of what I started to think about doing with my life in those next few months. But I hit a low point in terms of this uncertainty in mental health and self-hatred and anxiety kind of all came together at one point. So I'm working this internship I don't like. I haven't had that conversation which opens my awareness yet. I'm dreading it. I'm trying to transfer, but like I don't know where to go. And I'm in a relationship this whole time for the first time since that soulmate connection in high school. And this girl is awesome. She's super sweet. She's from around me. She's on the lacrosse team. And for the first time, I start to feel pretty safe with her. And I feel safe enough to open up about like the sexual performance anxiety things, which I haven't talked about yet in this video. But for those first 18 months of college, a big thing for college football players is like, especially when you're young, is you go out to the bar and you try to fuck girls. That's it. It's like a kind of a competitive thing, and you brag about it. You're like, yeah, I got this. And like I had friends who had like lists on their notes app of like how many girls they fucked and like all this crazy stuff. And my heart was never in it, but I didn't know myself enough to be able to say that's not for me. So I went along with it. And I played that game, but every single time I'd end up in bed with a girl from the bar, whatever it was. Just like it grosses me out now. Like the level of the lack of self-awareness and self-love and self-respect I had to be like, I'm just gonna go to this bar, I'm gonna drink, I'm gonna try to find a girl, and I'm gonna try to bring her back. And like, I might not even be attracted to her, but it's fine. I'm gonna go do it to prove to myself that I can do it. And every single time I'd end up back in bed with a girl, dick goes soft. Can't perform. And so much shame every time. I literally was ordering fucking Viagra as a 20-year-old off the internet, off a site called Hims, Hims or something. And if you're out there, you have performance anxiety, you don't need Hims. You need to love yourself and come into yourself and come from the heart. And that's a whole nother topic, but you don't need any solution, medicine that's outside of you. Any drug, you don't need any of it. It's all inside. And I didn't know that at the time. I thought something was wrong with me. Really thought something was wrong with me. And I knew it was all in my head because like in solitude I could jerk off, like I'm fine. But with a girl, I could never do it. Like it would come time and I'm overthinking, boom, can't do it. I'm so embarrassed. I'm just gonna go to sleep. And that was tough. That was really tough. My heart hurts. I am sending unconditional love back to that version of me. Who was lost and scared and confused and didn't know anything. It's okay. So around January, I'm at a bar and I start talking to this girl, but she seems different. Like she's not just trying to fuck. She's actually really not trying to fuck. She just seems sweet. And again, I'm not gonna say her name, but we start talking a little bit, and ends up she lives 10 minutes from me in my hometown, and so over winter break we go on a date. I kind of like her. I'm not really sure, but I feel like yeah, I kind of like her. Let's do this. So we start dating, and like her family meets my family, and we hang out a lot. And a few things started to happen. The most relevant one, where we're going to end this video, is despite dating this girl for 2.5, 3 months, we never had sex. She never even touched my dick. Because I was too scared. I was too shy. I was too insecure. The time would come, and I'd say no, I was too scared. And so it got to a point where at like 3 months, this was still going on, and she was so patient and sweet, so I have so much gratitude for her. And she didn't judge me. It was just me judging myself. But it came to a point where, like, I was like, what the I gotta do this. Like, and that, because I was coming from that place of I have to do this to prove to myself I can do it, it was never going to work. And so one night, we tried many times, and it still didn't work. And I remember I sent an email to a therapist for the first time in my life. It was a therapist my friend knew, and he had been going there, and I never thought I'd be the type to go to therapy, but I sent the email, and I'm like, it's like 10 o'clock at night. I was like, hey, something's wrong with me. I can't have sex with my girlfriend, and it's been 3 months, and I don't know what to do. And so I'm going to end this video there. We're going to talk about where it goes after this. That was a very rough time in my life. I was very lost. I was depressed. I was so anxious. I didn't know who I was. I had no self-confidence. I was numbing myself. But there was a part of me, a glimmer of awareness, a glimmer of potentiality that was still willing to see the future and willing to think big and willing to think I can change. And the courage I have, and I'm so happy with myself for doing this, the courage to go send that email was the catalyst for my entire life changing. That email, the willingness to accept I need help and I need to change. I want to change and I'm willing to accept help. That is the key. That is the fucking key to solve anything in your life. It is the willingness to be weak. It is the willingness to not know. It is the willingness to say, I don't know where to go. Please help. That is the seed of all change. It was the seed of change for me. So we're going to end this one here. If you liked it, like the video, subscribe, do all those things. Send it to a friend if you'd like. This is all going to get put into a book eventually. And I am opening myself up to doing one-on-one self-empowerment coaching. So basically one-on-one internal work, which creates our external world, alignment coaching. So I'm opening up a few spots for that. And it feels like me sharing the depths of my truth have opened space in me to hold space for others to this degree. So if you'd like to work with me in this one-on-one capacity, send me an email, jackmoses@jackmoses.co, or message me on Instagram or Twitter. It's likely the best place you could find me. And we could find a rate in terms of price, in terms of how often do we want to meet, what do we want to talk about. We can make it individual for you, and I want to make it affordable for people who have that same courage and willingness that I had as that 20-year-old kid in college who was lost and depressed to say, I want to change. So if that sounds like you, send me an email, send me a text, and we'll find something that works for you. And I'm sending so much love. Thank you for watching this second episode. It's a pleasure to share my story with you. And I love you, and we'll talk soon. Peace.